If you've ever thought about being a Shopify millionaire or an Amazon entrepreneur, you've probably thought about importing products from China. Well, in this video, I'm going to break down the very process that I go through to import products from the Far East and sell them here into the UK and European market. I've been to China a number of times now and I've learned a lot of stuff. It's a complicated project, but I'm going to try and give you some easy tips so that you can be super successful in your quest to import from the Far East. Right, gang, let's talk about China. It's a country with over 1 billion people. They are coined as the world's factory. That's very, very true. Nearly everything that we consume here in the world has China in the supply chain at some point. Even your car, your iPhone, your clothes, they'll be in the manufacturing process, even if it comes from Turkey, Portugal, or India. And I've imported from all of those countries. It's a behemoth of an economy. It's the second biggest economy in the world, which they've achieved in just 30 to 40 years. They are so important. They are a world superpower. I don't want to get political about it, and some people have got the ump with China, but you just can't ignore them. They are here to stay, and I've learned that. They are a country where if you want to make and manufacture certain things, only they can do it because of their huge population, because of the infrastructure that they have. It's so organized. And the people are nice, they're good. You know, I've been there so many times, like 7 times, and I go twice a year, each and every single year. I'm importing millions and millions of dollars of stuff from the Far East and selling it to my customers, mainly from a wholesale point of view, but we do about £100,000 a month direct to consumer, and we want to grow that part of our business on the back of our wholesale business. Now, I've made loads of videos all about that here on the channel. Go and check them out. I made one about doing millions of pounds on Shopify, and I think that will give you a really good sort of point of reference of what I do once I've got the products and how I sell into the marketplace. So go and check that one out. I'll put a link in the video description. Some of the things I think people really worry about China is the quality of product. Now look, I just want to sort of put this up here. This is my Apple iPhone. This is made in China. Literally every smartphone in the world is made in China, and I think we could all agree we're using it every single day. It's a high quality product. So as long as there's specification, the quality control, the R&D is there, and you give that good specification, you can have an amazing product or a terrible product. And that's what I really want to get through in this video. How do we not have a terrible product? How do we get what we really, really want? So let's break it down a little bit further. Let's just rewind here 20 years ago. If you speak to an importing business, they would have said they made lots and lots of money from China. Labor was really cheap. Well, now labor in China operates on multi-scales. You've got an ultra wealthy population and a massively growing middle class population that would earn wages very similar to here in the Western world. And then we've got the working population. There's a massive north-south divide in China like there is here in the United Kingdom. The north of the country, wages tend to be a lot lower than in the south of the country. And that's really important for importers to know, because China is a country where things are made in different areas and locations, and you need to know those different areas and locations, and I'm going to come up to that a little bit later. Now, lots of people have thought about importing from China, and usually the first thing they do, and indeed I use it as research, is go to Alibaba. I've never bought anything direct from Alibaba. To me, that's just too low barrier to entry. You don't get to know the products, you don't get to know the people making the products, and I think that's really important. So we use Alibaba and sites like madeinchina.com just for research purposes. I urge you not to buy direct from them because of a number of reasons around testing and QC, and I want to go into that later on, because you can get your fingers burnt if you don't do that correctly. So we just use those websites as research to give us a steer, and also when you buy from those websites, you'll see the prices are hugely inflated, so you're in many ways getting ripped off. The first stage, I think, if you're serious about importing from the Far East, is to get on a plane and go to some of the trade fairs out there. One of the biggest, well, the biggest in the world, is actually one called Canton Fair, and it's separated into 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, and you'll have different products at each phase. So electronics and home goods are in phase 1, toys and gifting is in phase 3, and clothing is in phase 2, and it changes a little bit each and every single year. There's loads of videos on YouTube or on the internet. Give it a quick Google and you can find out about Canton Fair. But that is one fair of many, many that happen in the country. So I think the best thing to do is, if you're serious about going to China, is get a plane booked and go to some of the trade fairs. You'll learn so much there than you would ever on just Mr. Google. So find out where the fairs are, order your plane ticket and get out there. That is my strongest piece of advice. That's what I did. I promise you, I learned more in 24 hours than I would have learned in years and months of researching on the internet. So once you get to those fairs, what do you do next? You're probably going to say, well, I really like this product. I see a gap in the market for my product. I want to sell it in my economy, in my local economy. How are you going to buy the stuff? Well, I think the best thing to do in your early years is try and find an agent or a sourcer. And you could have a factory that's also an agent. So a factory makes a particular product, but then their staff can also source other products from other factories, and they would be the senior factory that goes and buys everything for you. That's quite a good tip. Now, what I actually prefer though is someone that isn't associated to a factory, that's just a sourcing agent, that's got an office, and they go out there, they're your boots on the ground, they find your products, but you co-work with them. So you go and do the factory visits, you go to the trade fairs with them, and they do all the paperwork, the administration. You know, they're careful on some factories, don't go there, they won't work for your local marketplace. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. I think it's really important that we understand that. So factories, agents and sourcers. As you get more experienced and you've maybe been to China 10 times, maybe you've imported 20, 40 foot containers, you feel like you really understand what you're doing and you've learnt some of the idiosyncrasies of importing from China, maybe you go direct to the factories and you employ your own people and build an office out there like I've done to really understand the challenges of importing from China. What I would say though is most of my dealings with China have been amazing. If something goes wrong, they want the very best for you and they try and sort it out. It's a country that you can trust to do business with. They do make lots of mistakes on QC, but they will do their very best to put it right. And look, business is a learning game. If something goes wrong and you're dealing with someone that wants to put it right, that's a good thing. There is, to me, a rule of law on that point. So let's talk about different locations making different things. China is this massive, huge country. When I go there, I'm doing hundreds, thousands of miles of travel each and every single day. I've been literally doing London to Malaga, which is in Spain, form of travel every day to get to the different locations. So if you wanted to buy technology products, you would go to Shenzhen. If you wanted to buy small toys, you might go to Shanghai. If you wanted to buy small commodity products, you might go to EU. If you wanted to buy furniture, you would go to Foshan. So there's all these different locations that you need to learn about to understand where most of the factories are that make the products that you want. It's a rule of thumb. Obviously, if you go to, I don't know, Shenzhen, there might be a factory there that does make toys, but mostly that's a technology area. As you go norther in the country, I go to Jihan, for example, there's a massive growing factory population there of handmade products that didn't used to be there 10 years ago. So you've got to be understanding all this stuff. That's why having boots on the ground and having a member of team out there that can go and visit these factories and see how the manufacturing process is done can make your time when you go to China much more efficient. And that's what I do. I did sort of mention this earlier. Remember that north-south divide. The south of China is where most of the money sits. So just above Hong Kong, you've got Guangzhou and Guangdong. There's so much money around there, and the cost of buying products there, usually better quality, but the labor is much higher, so therefore the product is much more expensive. What you've got now is you've got the R&D in the offices of Chinese companies in some of those wealthier tier 1 cities like Beijing, like Guangzhou, but they're making the products maybe 5 hours away, and they've got a factory set up in the north of the country, which means that you can get your products for much cheaper. Let's talk about MOQs, FOBs and USDs, some acronyms there. Now, MOQs MOQs are really important for importers. This stands for minimum order quantities. Now, most of the stuff that I buy, most factories want 3,000 MOQs. So if you're buying coffee cups, 3,000 of them. If you're buying pens, 3,000 of them. Now, that might seem quite extreme, but we're going to come on to testing later. You want to make sure that you're testing your products so that the paints or the oils or the materials that are used are not toxic or acidic. They've been fire tested, and you've got to pay for that testing certificate. And if you're only buying in 300 items, you could have a £2,000 testing certificate, maybe a £500 testing certificate. But if it's done over 3,000 products, the testing certificate is massively shrunk in terms of the economies of scale you get on your testing. So you want to have minimum order quantities that are high, but not too high that it's such a cash flow drain on you. And really what you want to do is you want to get products that fill a 40-foot container or use LCL, which is pallets that are shared in a container. At the moment, actually, in some regions of China, the Chinese government are subsidizing the cost of those LCL pallet orders, which make it cheaper than importing a container. That's why having a really good agent sourcer in China that knows all these moving parts that are happening can save you a lot of money. So you've got minimum order quantities. You find a product, you want to try and get that minimum order quantity as low as possible, but enough economies of scale that it makes your testing as efficient as possible. And testing is really important. Lots of people that import just ignore the testing. I urge you, that is very, very dangerous, because if trading standards pick that up, or you bring in a product that isn't fit for purpose and then someone tries to sue you, if you haven't got your testing, you're in dangerous water. The testing is really expensive, but absolutely the best insurance policy, and therefore you know that you're doing the right stuff. So minimum order quantities with testing. Now, FOB, this stands for freight on board. So a factory, let's use our coffee cups example. They make 3,000 coffee cups. They will put into the price the freight to get it on board the ship. Then your shipping agent then takes it over to get it from the Chinese port to the European port or the UK port. So they will put that cost of getting it from their factory, which could be a 6-hour journey away, to get it to Shanghai, Ningbo, or one of the ports in China. So you ask for that price freight on board. You just don't want to get involved in that, trying to pick it up from the factory yourself, unless you've got a really good team in China. You'll usually be paying in USD, that's dollars. So you'll be paying in American dollars. Sometimes they will quote you in yuan, Chinese yuan, RMB they call it. You want to get that over to USD because that's how you'll be paying. And as a rule of thumb, you need to add on quite a bit more percentage to your USD price to put on the pricing of getting that product from China into your UK warehouse. It, at the moment, is around £5,000 for a container to get it from China into the UK. Then you've got to store it in your warehouse. You've got to pay for people to pick and pack it here in the UK to get it to your customers. So there's a lot more on costs rather than just the Chinese price. I always say add on around 35% to the price that you're paying from China to add on all your freight and getting it into your UK warehouse and then shipping it back out to your customer. Boots on the ground is absolutely essential if you want to do this properly. You've got to get out there a couple of times a year like I do, get to know your team, get to trust your team, and educate your team out in China on the QC that you absolutely demand. You want to make sure that you're bringing in the best possible products. And if I was importing from China, try and find products that once you've done all the work, you repeat. Nearly all my lines that I've imported from the Far East, from Turkey, from India, and indeed China, I've repeated many times. So if I brought in a teddy bear, I might make that teddy bear 3 or 4 times a year. I've done all of that QC work, working out what it's going to look like, done all my testing, found the right factory, and I can just rinse and repeat the process. Imagine if you're doing fashion like clothing, for example, like every single year there's a new season, 3 or 4 times a year. So you've got to keep on finding new products, and the work always starts from zero. I like doing leverage work. I find my products, I put a lot of effort into making the products, and then I repeat. repeat. That's a big part of my experience. Let's talk about payment terms. Usually when you place an order, you put a 30% deposit down, and then you could have 8 weeks for the product to be manufactured, sometimes 4 weeks, but always allow 8 weeks. I think that's a really good, good benchmark. It gets put on a ship, and then when it gets to the United Kingdom or your country of operation, you're given a bill of lading. That means you then have to pay the other 70% to get the container released outside of customs here in the UK. So a 30% deposit on manufacture, and then 70% when it lands here in the UK. That's a rough rule of thumb. Yes, you can go to your bank or use credit insurance, which all has interest rates obviously on it to make that easier, but as a rough rule of thumb, 30% deposit, pay the 70% once it gets here to the UK to release the goods. Now, once you've been to China a few times, you'll understand exactly how it all starts to work. I think on your 5th visit, you really start understanding regions and the tax advantages that the factories get. And I think it's really important that you understand this. I don't think the factories make a lot of money from the products that they manufacture. They're doing it at the best possible price because they want to get the order. And here's why. They want to get the tax rebates from the Chinese government. They can get anywhere between 3 and 13% of the total invoice that they charge you, the buyer, back as a tax rebate. So put that into perspective here. If they invoice out £1 million worth of stuff that's going out to Europe, the Chinese government will give them 3 to 13%. That could be 30 or £130,000 back on the value of that export invoice. That's a big amount of their profit for them. In fact, in many cases, they can get that banked and get the profit in advance and use that as their cash flow. And there's loads of banks that support them in China that believe in that stuff. Also, when you're buying in from China, obviously if the quantities go up, the price of the product goes down. But remember, if you're buying in big quantities, you've got to store it here in the UK before you convert that stock back into cash. So if I was buying these trusty Post-it notepads and it was, 35 cents for 3,000. You go, what if I buy 25,000? Does the price half? Well, in my experience, that 33 cents then goes down to, say, 31 cents. So a tiny saving, which is a good indication that actually they're not making huge amounts of profit on these, even a lower quantity. And then I'm thinking, well, if I do buy and save those 2 cents, I've got to store it here in the UK, thus paying more business rates, more warehousing costs, and I've got to think about that stuff. So sometimes I prefer the lower minimum order quantities, paying that slightly higher price, but turn my stock quicker and not having such a big warehouse and business rates cost here in the UK. Let's talk about QC and testing. I really want to labour this point. You must test your products. You must do QC, because if you don't do that, you could get a slightly substandard product that comes here into the UK. Maybe they haven't got the colours correct, or the packaging isn't as good, and your customers don't want to buy from you. And it's really easy to sell once, but can you get repeat orders? I always say that to my team in our ice cream business. Like, we can really easily sell our ice cream once, but if people taste it and they don't like it, are they going to buy it again? Actually, very, very similar for QCing your products that you import. You want the best quality products that people like it, and then they come back to you and repeat buy it. Your testing covers you to make sure you're using the best quality materials, that everything's tested and there's no toxicity in the products that you're manufacturing. Intertech, for example, is a great testing company, and there's loads. Go and Google those, because that is going to be a cost that you've got to put on top of your product. Testing and QC, absolutely the biggest thing that any experienced importer knows, because otherwise you just end up throwing your stock away. Usually the Chinese factories will give you some of your money back, but you don't want to go through that. You just want a nice, easy business. Do not scrimp on the QC and testing. Gang, if you're loving this video and you want to learn more, I'm doing a big event in London called Business Masterclass, and I do a whole section on importing products, all the things that I've learned. A big session. Plus, if you want to find out how to get customers, buy companies, and do everything in between, it's all in Business Masterclass. Tickets are only a few £100 and I do it live in London. It's me on stage teaching you for 2 days all the best stuff that I know about entrepreneurship. There's a link in the video description. I'd love to see you at Business Masterclass. Right, let's do some top tips about everything that we've learned. Let's conclude and round up this video. You've got to get on a plane. If you're serious about doing this stuff, Alibaba just ain't gonna cut it. You've got to get out there, get to those trade fairs, find a sourcing agent that can work with you in the early years, and hopefully you can then help them build a team of boots in the ground in China. And if you're going to look for products, choose products where there is a hungry audience. So as soon as it lands here in the UK or in Europe, wherever, or America, wherever you are, people are going to want to buy that product from you straight away. You can move the product quick so you have a good cash conversion cycle. I think there's still huge opportunities of importing products and building a wholesale and direct to consumer business here in the UK or in the Western world, because people just cannot make this stuff in the Western economies. There just isn't the amount of people. I mean, I get that all the time to me. James, why don't you just manufacture it here in the UK? Well, look, there's 65 million people that live in the United Kingdom. China have 1 billion people. That's why they can do stuff. That's why they can manufacture stuff. People just will not pay the amount here in the Western economies for certain products that will compete with the cheaper Eastern labour costs. And that is just a harsh fact. If you're making products here in the Western economy, it's got to be a luxury item. It's got to be a high-end item for you to survive. You've got to be like Hermes, that still make everything themselves, but they're doing it at huge margins. They're buying in and making something for one and putting a 15 times multiple on it. That just isn't going to happen with the Eastern economies, turning it into a Western economy product. Hopefully that's answered a lot of questions. If you are coming to Business Masterclass, I can't wait to see you there. It's going to be 2 great days in London. Terrific value for money, just a few £100, and I'll see you at Business Masterclass to help grow your business. See you there. Bye-bye.